Outside of some Team USA, Joel Embiid basketball, seems like the summer is now over as far as the fun beginning with the Philadelphia 76ers. For us, this is really where it really gets fun and interesting going forward. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast on a Monday and our new start time of 3 p.m. As we told you on Friday, Kyle yelling at Bo and Zach and Derek doing the same thing on Twitter. We have a new start time, 3 p.m. going forward. And we just want to make sure we let everybody know, for those who are already there, you remembered, as Jay of the Jungle said, right at the top. And we appreciate you being here with us for the show, along with Derek Bodner and Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens. Bree is here with us. We are remote today because we just didn't feel like going to the office. We're just trying to still catch up after being in Las Vegas 8 days. So we needed a few days away from the studio. And that's where we are. Thank you all for being here. Fellas, Derek, good to see you, man.
Good to be back. I missed you guys. Yeah, mostly Devon, but I'll include you guys as a general. And I missed the audience most of all.
Yes,
I'm surprised Derek is actually alive. Let's put it that way.
I don't really feel alive, if I'm being honest.
Anyone who decides to extend an 8-day trip to Vegas to stay out there longer is just asking for punishment from God or Mother Nature or
I got it from Mother Nature. I got it from random hawks in the air. I had a whirlwind of a time. Oh, you didn't see that? I had a drone stolen.
I didn't see the hawk
swooped down from above, grabbed it by the GoPro, and flew away with it. I actually ended up right when I saw the wings. I cut power to make sure I didn't harm the hawk, hoping that eventually he would let go and I could get it back. But no, he just took it to the other side of the mountain. I never saw the drone again. Anyway, I got punished in many different ways, including right now being more than a little bit under the weather. But I really did have, if you broke down my trip, and I had the first 4 days we were there for Team USA. And quite frankly, I thought we were all relatively well behaved during those first 4 days. Like, we were there, we were working, we were hanging out, going out to dinner, but that really ended our festivities there. And then you had the second half, which was summer league, or the second 4 days, which is summer league focused. And we got a little rowdy at that point, went a little, little harder than maybe I was used to. And I don't even think I'm saying that necessarily as like an old guy curve. Like, I think 25-year-old me would have been like, hey, I need a day off on that one. And then I had the last 4 days, which was sort of like sightseeing through Zion and other national parks. And that was incredible until I got sick at the end. But it was definitely a long time to be out in the desert for sure.
No question. Well, good to have you back, man. A lot to catch up on as we get this thing going. Talk about little Joel Embiid, Team USA. A lot has been going on over the weekend with Joel after an interview that he did with the New York Times, and then the game happening where they just, Kyle, squeaked the winner out with South Sudan, man, by 1 point because LeBron James had to save the day. Oh, man. So we'll talk about Jeff Dowtin a little bit later, the Summer League with McCain, Jared McCain, and how he finished things off. We got it all for you right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast. But yeah, Kyle, 1 point win for the USA squad before we get into Embiid in general. Royal Ivy's team, he has those guys playing pretty well where they it looked like they were actually going to win that game, man.
Yeah, and it certainly looked like people decided that they knew what the reason was before the game had even started, right? Kind of is the conclusion that I'm coming to watching the games myself and then seeing what people are saying about them online. I guess I shouldn't be entirely shocked by it, but look, give credit to the guys at South Sudan, right? Like, they came in ready to play. They shot really well for, I'd say, most of the first half and put some fear in Team USA. You could clearly see there was a different level of urgency for most of those guys in the second half between LeBron and Steph, I think, primarily carrying Team USA for a lot of that second half. And even, the bench guys who we'll get to the Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis thing in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, look, there have been a lot of comparisons thrown around between this iteration of Team USA and, well, do they have more talent than the Dream Team, or are they more talented than the 2008, 2012, and, running through every one of them. I think really the comparisons are less important between the Team USA editions, which are always going to be very strong. It's more meaningful, like, this South Sudan team has more NBA players than, like, if you took 90% of the teams that played in the 92 Olympics and combined them, probably wouldn't have as many NBA players or NBA caliber players involved as that team, who was a 43.5-point underdog on Saturday. So the world has changed a lot from a basketball perspective over the last 30-ish years, 32 years since the Dream Team Olympics. And in some ways, that's a credit to that team back then and their influence on the world, sort of helping to spread basketball's popularity back then. And certainly in this instance, you give a lot of credit to Luol Deng, who's been super involved with building up that program, to Royal Ivy, who he's coaching them and helping them out. And then the guys who have taken on the challenge, like Wenyen Gabriel has, to be, or former Sixers legend Marial Shayok came out and shot the heck out of the ball. You give credit to those guys, I think, more than anything, right? They have embraced this challenge and they made Team USA remember, like, hey, you got to actually show up for this game or we might take it from you.
Yeah, they from Shayok, and they be seeing him make an appearance there. He's a big shot there towards the end. And Wenyen Gabriel, as you mentioned, yeah, those guys done a pretty good job. Luol Deng, Royal Ivy, putting that squad together, getting them to go out there and compete the way that they are as they move on to the Olympics. It's good to see that, just the competition. And we've talked about it for a while, where these other countries have caught up to USA in terms of competition and being able to go out there on the floor and match that intensity and understand the FIBA rules maybe better than, or the Olympic rules and the FIBA rules better than the USA guys, for some of them who haven't been there yet. It's even when you know it, though, it's still an adjustment. There was a play where I was watching the ball just hang around there on the rim until somebody actually tipped it off. And it was like, oh, I forgot you can actually do that. And they took advantage of the situation. But, I mean, these teams that, as they get ready to play Germany, who played really well, obviously, last summer and taking the gold, they have been playing for a long time. And Team USA really has to get their act together and not think. They said it after game one when we were all in Las Vegas. Hey, we have to figure things out. It's just game one, and we'll get it together. We'll get everything together. We'll be on the same page. We're all understanding our roles on this team. But we are now getting ready for game number 5, and the game's getting closer and closer and closer, where they probably should have lost that game over the weekend. They did not. Great play by LeBron to get to the rim and finish. I don't know how it wasn't a foul call in the first. To be honest with you, just watching basketball, I don't know how it wasn't a foul call. I just thought the whistle was going to blow on that final possession for South Sudan, but it did not. They escaped. They got the win. Something for them to, of course, go off of and take that look at the film and get ready for this one. But they cannot go out there, Derek, and expect to just walk on the floor and beat these basketball teams. They're too good.
Yeah, and I think the point that Kyle brought up about, these teams have been playing together for a long time. It's not just they show up at the end and expect that your talent's going to carry you, which, I mean, quite frankly, most years it does. How many years in a row is it now that it has for Team USA? It does, but it can be bumpy along the way. The world has made up a lot of that ground. A lot of these players here have at least had a taste of the NBA, including, like Kyle mentioned, Sixers legend Marial Shayok. It was great seeing him not just have a big shot late, but he carried them throughout the game. JT Thor's on that team. Like, there are NBA players on that team, and there will be on NBA players on pretty much.
Boy, JT Thor.
JT Thor, got to bring him up. I think he's still unsigned. The Sixers need a third string center. But he played well in that game, and there's going to be stiff competition throughout. The world has not necessarily caught up, but they're close enough now that their familiarity with each other, and the fact they played together far more than Team USA does, is going to close some of that talent gap. And the Sixers, Team USA might not be playing at their peak right now. Obviously, getting Kevin Durant back, if he's ready to go for the start of the Olympics, would be huge. But there's just it's so much tougher nowadays, and I do worry a little bit if something happens with this iteration of Team USA, that the Joel Embiid discourse will be ungodly, because quite frankly, it has been, and he even played well the other night, and it's still, haters are coming out of the woodwork. But it is, they're going to have to play well. They're going to have to play much better.
Yeah, I have it on the second screen right now, by the way, just to keep tabs on what's going on at the moment. I did see a long Joel outlet for a LeBron James dunk. So that was at least, I think one of the silliest things I've seen is that Joel is like somehow stagnating the offense. And like, look, I get it. The way Joel inherently wants to play or has played over the years is get the ball at the nail, jab step, post up, do those sorts of things. I haven't really seen that on a regular. I mean, we see it possession here, possession there.
The first quarter of game one is when you really saw it.
Moving, rolling, spacing the floor, putting him in actions with Steph Curry and LeBron James. And it was what was irritating about the South Sudan discourse specifically, right? I understood that opening game and the first couple against Australia, against Canada. I thought you could say, like, look, he clearly looks like a guy off the pace, and he looks like someone that is not up to the task that they need him for, especially with Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo playing well. And then, I'm like, I don't know why I even go on Twitter at this point, but I go on Twitter and I see people losing their minds on Saturday. And maybe it's just, there are just too many Lakers fans out there. There are just too many people who have been poisoned by Lakers brain in the world, because Joel missed one shot. He had one bad turnover, and that was basically it, right? Like, everything else was, he's getting Steph open for open threes on pin down screens. He's hitting LeBron on back cuts. They're working him into, excuse me, some nice 3-man actions between him and Steph and LeBron. And he's rebounding the ball. Was his defense as good as it needs to be? No, but none of these guys are really trying that hard defensively, right? Especially not in the starting lineup. And you could see at the end of the game, when Anthony Davis was in there with LeBron and with Steph, you could see that when LeBron is not trying, it is not as easy to be the lone rim protector when you don't have Bam Adebayo alongside you. And the other part I don't understand is the idea that, like, oh yeah, move him to the second unit. Okay, so if your concern is that the offense is stalling out and, oh, Joel's the problem, do you think that's going to get better playing him next to Anthony Edwards playing hero ball and Jason Tatum jacking up fucking garbage threes and Bam Adebayo not being able to credibly space the floor at all? That second unit would be a disaster. So it's either you have to make it work with him on that first unit, and look, some people probably believe this, or you have to basically just sit him down entirely and not play him, which I think is complete nonsense. So what I have seen is Joel figuring things out on the fly and getting better within this structure and within the international game. But a lot of people determined before the Olympics have started that he is a coattail rider and completely ruining the team. And the discourse is just ridiculous. It doesn't surprise me a ton, but it surprises me a little bit that it's been this bad already.
It's been really bad. And I know we'll get to, saw a couple of comments that I wanted to bring up as people were saying things in the chat. The one that was the worst for me was, it just made me laugh. And I couldn't even get through the entire thing because I thought it was just ignorant and stupid, was Gilbert Arenas saying some really dumb stuff.
Well, that's a shocker.
Yeah, it was really dumb, though. Even thinking about who's saying it and who's relaying this message, as you said, that's a shocker. Even this one was like, come on, dude. Like, really? This is where you're going to go just because they won a game by 1 point? Come on, stop. And you're right, Kyle. It was one shot and one bad turn.
What did Gilbert Arenas say? Because I missed it.
Well, he said that Joel was throwing the game. He was playing against his cousins. They didn't. All kinds of stuff.
That's just fucking xenophobic and racist.
It was bad. It was bad. There's more to it. You can look at it a little bit later. Like I said, I had to get out after a while because I was like, this is really stupid.
He was plus 15, by the way.
Even for him. I was
in a game where his backup was minus 14. What are you fucking talking about?
Yeah, that was the worst one for me. So all the stuff that people were saying, it's ridiculous because there's an agenda, as you pointed out.
Come on,
and the way that Joel is playing with them, to your point, yes, plus 15. He's had 2 good games in succession. So I think he's actually, as you said, starting to figure it out. But they just want to go with what they want to go with and ignore the fact that, yes, when they play with pace, sometimes it works. When they play slowing it down a little bit, that's how Steve Kerr wants to do it. We didn't get a chance to fit it into the show on Friday, what we said we were going to talk about, what Kerr pointed out, which was he's going to stick with his starters of Curry, James, and Embiid. After that, he's not sure with where he wants to go. I don't know who he started today. You had the game on. I didn't get a chance to see it, but that's what he wants to do. If there was something that he could do and felt like Embiid wasn't playing well enough, he probably would have made an adjustment to the starting lineup like he did with the other guards and the other wings that have been in the rotation of starting since this thing got underway. So it's getting kind of boring because we've talked about this. How many times have we talked about this when it comes to the MVP stuff and all? It's just lazy. And that's where they go. And right now, instead of saying the other teams are playing well, or even some of the players on Team USA are not playing as great, they point at the Embiid part. We acknowledge when he does something silly and not play well, or does something stupid overall. We'll say it. It's lazy what they're doing when it comes to that. But we can talk about some more stuff because one of the other things that had everybody talking about Joel Embiid was a conversation that he had, that he made some quotes and said some things and it got people all riled up. Talk about Joel when we get back a little bit more because he is hot right now in terms of some things that he has going on out there. We do that right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
Well, guys, from day-to-day annoyances to having to listen to Gilbert Arenas try to analyze basketball, despite being a very good player, that analysis can get you quite worked up. There's always a better way or a chiller way. Rather than reacting to people like that, you can choose chill and then reach for an ice-cold Coors Light. Coors Light, you know you're getting an ice-cold beer because the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans right as they hit that perfect temperature. When I'm trying to get through a summer free of takes, free of bad opinions, free of people's podcasts who, frankly, I don't listen to, sometimes it could become tough because someone like my co-host Devon here might bring it up anyway on the show and force me to have to deal with the consequences of other people's stupidity.
That's right.
When I get to that point, when I have to, yell at Devon for something he hasn't said but just brought to my attention, I know I can always choose chill and choose a cold layered, cold filtered, cold packaged Coors Light that has a smooth finish and get that mountain cold refreshment. When you choose to rise above it all, choose chill, choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. You're muted, Devon.
When you guys are on, so I don't.
What's funny is he even dropped in commentary during your read. He even said that's right at some point during your read, and then muted.
I had to mute myself again so I wouldn't get in Kyle's way. But I will tell you, as we don't want any financial issues to get in the way of your vacation, that you have to make sure everything is up to par when you're traveling. You saw all the issues with the outages and the internet and things of that nature, where you want to make sure you're secure with everything when it comes to your finances while you are on the road, whether it's local, national, abroad, wherever you are. We want to make sure that TrueMark, our friends, take care of you. And that is with their TrueMark Financial Rewards Visa credit card. Earn rewards for each purchase using TrueMark's Financials Rewards Visa credit card and redeem them for travel and retail gift cards. Build credit through timely payments and low credit utilization. Enjoy fraud protection with features like zero liability. You know you love that. Zero liability of overall. And again, the timely payments help build up your credit if you're looking to do some other things in the future, like maybe buy a home, and you can also revisit some things with TrueMark Financial overall. They have traditional savings accounts for your basic savings account, offering a place to deposit funds, earn interest, withdraw money as you need it, and also with certificates, fixed term rates, deposit account with a predetermined interest rate and maturity date, offering higher interest rates for locking in funds for a specific period. So if that is for you, TrueMark Financial is federally insured by the NCUA and is an equal opportunity lender. For more information, visit truemark.com/PHLY. All right, my mic is not muted anymore as I just got through that read. And
as Jess mentioned in the chat, you have the strongest mute button in the game, buddy.
Hey, man. Hey, thank you, Jess. I got to do that to make sure I don't get anybody's way. But Derek, I know that, you were away on vacation and all, but Joel Embiid got some people riled up a little bit with some things that he mentioned in the New York Times article where They were discussing some things about Team USA and how they have to go out there and play hard. He mentioned how the team is out there playing hard, but nobody's just going to lay down for them. And the team is not the same. So everybody can't look at them and expect them to just walk out there and win. Good to hear it, because we view the game and say the same thing. Don't expect you to just walk out there, roll the ball, and win. But he starts pointing out how LeBron James is a little bit older. He's not the same. Things of that nature and all. It always seems like he says things. He's very smart, but he can still put his foot in his mouth at times where he has the people talking. And that's exactly what he did this weekend with that New York Times article. As we don't have to speak up for him and defend him at all. Sometimes we do, because we think people go a little bit too far. I don't know how you view that one, because even for me, I was like, Joel, I wish you just said the normal cool stuff that you say and not put your foot in your mouth. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think like most things, Joel, he speaks what's on his mind. He does so with some thought behind it. But ultimately, a lot of fans don't want people to say what's actually on their mind, especially athletes. Especially athletes with a platform as large as he does, because he's just going to eventually say something that some people are going to take offense with. And I think the LeBron thing was probably the most easily avoidable one that he said. We all understand he is not the same player he was 12 years. When was the last time he participated in the Olympics? 12 years ago, something like that. He's not the same player as he was in his 20s, not the same physically, but he's still an incredible player who is, quite frankly, carrying the team at various points. You probably don't need to point out that he's taken a step back. I think that was probably pretty easily avoidable. There are other things people took some exception with that I think is probably a little, I can certainly look past a little more. I thought, quite frankly, the fact that he was willing to talk about the injuries and the depression aspect of it, I give him a lot of credit for that. It's very tough for someone of that stature and with that platform to come out and talk openly about depression. And that's not an easy thing to talk about. So even if maybe some people question the message behind it, I appreciate the fact that he brought that out there in the open once again, as he has done over the past few months, especially since that last injury. So I think those were sort of like my two major takeaways. The other one was the injuries and whether or not he could have been the GOAT. And, you know, I think some people look at that as making an excuse, but there's just a simple fact that when you get injured like that, it strips away part of your legacy because you're not able to make those deep playoff runs that you maybe had a better chance of making if you were fully healthy. And B, it ties into the depression aspect that he was talking about. So I think it was almost unavoidable to talk about. But I think some people have been criticizing him there. And it's like they want to say, well, you should have been the GOAT. Well, he's a guy who couldn't play basketball 15 years ago and has become one of the best players in the world. I think that's more the story than could he have been the GOAT and he's just looking for excuses. I don't think that's necessarily fair. So I think, like I said, to me, I think the one that was most avoidable was probably the LeBron comment. It's also probably least consequential. I think he's going to end up getting a lot of hate from a lot of people on various parts of that interview. And none of it really bothers me, if I'm being honest.
All right. So I will join the critics on the LeBron comment specifically, because he wasn't asked a question about LeBron, right? He's asked a question about Team USA's chances to win a gold medal. I don't want to hear the fucking soft shoeing about like, oh, well, this might have, like, dude, you have by far the most talented team in the Olympics. It's not close.
Sure.
So I don't want to hear from him. That, to me, it just feeds into all the things people say about him, like the excuse making type stuff. I don't want to hear the preemptive, like, well, LeBron's 39. I don't know. Like, go in there. And if you're, Joel loves to talk his shit, right? And I know that he has talked less of it over the years and that he's tried to, because he's gotten himself in trouble. But you don't have to be like, yes, we have a great team. We have a bunch of legends. I bring this, but like you can give it doesn't have to be a generic quote, but I don't want to hear, it's just that sat with me the wrong way. All the other stuff I agree with you on. Like, I'm glad that he's open about the dealing with depression while he's been playing and just like the ups and downs of dealing with his injuries. And I don't care that he thinks that he could have had one of the greatest careers ever. Like, he still might end up getting there. And what I brought up on Twitter the other day was that, you know, people think of that as it relates to the playoff stuff, like not being healthy enough, not being good enough. Then imagine if, and this would have taken him off of the Sixers possibility list. Imagine if he doesn't miss 2 years to start his career and he can actually spend 2 years playing basketball and developing sooner, and maybe how much better he could have been by 2018, 2019 to be, a sidekick to Jimmy Butler or like a teammate to some of these other guys who came in. He could have been, maybe he's not MVP Joel that soon, but maybe he gets there a little bit quicker, and some of these team building consequences that come in don't happen. So like the rest of it, I'm fine with him feeling like he's had things taken from him. I really enjoy his perspective on, the trials and tribulations of being Joel and dealing with all the injuries and whatnot. But there's just no reason. Louis getting fired up in here, by the way. That's the joys of doing these from home. I don't know if you can hear him. He's really mad. I just don't appreciate the LeBron thing was, as you said, Derek, avoidable. And I just thought it was like, I think it's kind of bullshit too. Like, I don't want to hear excuses. You're on Team USA. You're on by far the number one basketball team in the world. All that stuff I said about the world catching up, that's all true. They are still miles and miles ahead of everybody else. And I don't want to hear LeBron's like 40 years old and he's not as good as he, like, come on.
No, that part, when you start to talk about that and making an excuse, there is none. You put yourself on this team for a reason, because you thought that you guys had a chance and you are the best. And they said as much when they were having their interviews and all before, right around when camp was starting. And then, of course, when they started playing those games, that even though they have to figure some things out, they are still very, very talented and should win. And they're all going for the goals. So, yeah, the excuse of LeBron and being 40, LeBron's playing pretty well. I mean, he can't do everything that he used to do at the same level, but you're still pretty damn good where everybody else wants to beat you. So, got to put your shoes on, got to go out there, and you got to get ready to play against these teams. You know you're going to get the best of everyone coming out there each and every time that you play. So, just go out there and do it. So, that part was one, and the adding to it, like you guys said, the LeBron piece, where I was just like, man, come on, you didn't need to go there, because now you are going to have everybody just bringing this up, talking about it. It's the summer. There's not a lot going on, so that's going to be a highlight of these conversations on these other talk shows that are just going to point out Joel saying LeBron is old and they're teammates, and how's LeBron going to sit with that in the locker room with all these things are just going to happen, and it's just going to add to the excuses of people picking at Embiid whenever things don't go well out there on the floor. So all of that stuff was avoidable. You see it in the chat where Al is asking our buddy Al, the 2-minute warning, saying Joel is the biggest troll there is. Yeah, I don't think he was trolling with this one. When Derek talked about it at the very top, he gives the interview. He knows what he wants to say. He says it, but I don't think it was him trolling in this one. He's well thought out. And then he even got into the other stuff of the mental aspect and having to deal with depression, with the injuries and all. I don't think it was a troll job in this one. But, that's Joel. And that's what comes with the territory when it does come with Joel. And now many more people are seeing it on a national stage because he's a part of this basketball team.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I thought the LeBron part was easily the most avoidable, and the one that really, like, the GOAT stuff will get a lot of play just because people love debating the GOAT and people love reading into what they believe is excuse making. I don't think Embiid, quite honestly, would have gotten to GOAT level. It's real tough to do that in today's NBA, in part because you can't build a dynasty like you can in previous eras of basketball. But regardless of that, I do think the injuries impacted his legacy quite a bit. Maybe not all the way. Maybe he should have broken through one of these playoff runs regardless, but they certainly did have an impact, and I give him some sympathy for that. The LeBron one was just it was the one that he easily could have avoided, and the disappointing one because of that.
Yeah, it was. All right, we need to talk about the current roster because some things were changed just a little bit over the last couple of days with one of the guards that we have talked about, that is Jeff Dowtin. We'll get to Jeff Dowtin, speak on him, as he had a pretty good summer from Utah to Las Vegas. Wasn't supposed to play in Las Vegas, but he was brought on. Took the opportunity to play with this basketball team, and it looks like he's going to be rewarded for that. We will talk about that when we get back right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
First, we want to tell you about a couple of our friends. First up, Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data. and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. Just go to Indeed.com/AllCity right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
You also need some things in your house where people come over and say, oh, that's pretty cool. Where did you get that from? Well, you can tell them about our friends who are now back as we get ready to approach the middle of summer, getting ready for the football season as training camp gets underway. And if we were in the studio right now, I would tell you to look behind us and you can see those great things that you can show off your home from our friends at FOCO.
You took from us illness, pointing to the bobbleheads, the fatheads,
yes,
the posters, all the good stuff in our studio.
Where you can look at the screen and you can see the FOCO graphic we have right there of Jalen Hurts and Gritty and the overalls there, right there, that you can also get from our leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and much more. Best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms out there. Going to a basketball or hockey game when things roll back around, show you off your love with the team branded friendship bracelets. Right now, you can get some Phillies things going on because, as we know, they're still very, very good. Even though they dropped 2 to Pittsburgh, they came back, took 1 back on Sunday. Special thanks to, of course, the man who always does things when things are not going right, and that is Nick Castellanos. We can get to him a little bit later, whether it's hoodies, jackets, beachwear for right now if you're still hitting the beach. Just because we are still in July, you have plenty of time to do so, or even those overalls, there is something for fans for almost every occasion. FOCO has hooked PHLY up and provided awesome pieces for our sets. You'll see that with our other shows who are in studio, us when we're back in studio later this week. FOCO always has our back for Philly sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in our description. For all non-presale items, use the promo code PHLY10 for 10% off. There, Nick Castellanos. We don't have to talk about the other side of it, but he always does it. He just always does it.
It's really amazing. It's truly, truly amazing. And I look, he drives me absolutely insane for 99% of the year. But that he continues to stick to the bit, I appreciate that so much.
He absolutely does.
No, you know what people missed yesterday, though? Everyone was so focused on the big political news. I was like, oh, he's going to hit a home run for that. Tom Brenneman got his job back.
He did.
That was the real catalyst.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, that was the start of the Nick Castellanos drives one to left field.
But Kyle, why did he have to do it with 2 outs? He was the last one to get an opportunity. So it was like, all right, this is a real thing going forward with this guy. So when they get to the World Series, you just need some crazy stuff to happen in order for him to make sure he's the hero of the World Series in October. 2 outs, man, and he hits the home run.
This is enough baseball talk for me for about a month, so I'm good on.
You gotta go with it, man.
I absolutely do not. That's why I'm on a basketball show and not a baseball show.
That's why we bring it up and talk FOCO, because now we got to get you. We got to get you a Phillies overall, since you try to avoid talking about the Phillies on the basketball show.
No, it's not. I try to. It's that I do. I'm successful at it. That's why the show exists.
Not
so
now,
that people who just want to hear about real sports can listen to this show, and people who want to hear about a sport you can play while having a beer belly, like I have, you can go watch the Phillies.
Catch Kyle on the PHLY Phillies podcast.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm worried if you keep up this line of questioning, Kyle might close his browser.
Yeah, and then you'd be left with the guy who's coughing up a storm.
I can barely talk. Yep.
Luck to you on that one.
We'll be all good. Kyle's not going anywhere. All right, Jeff Dowtin, 2-way contract. He got it. He got it, fellas. He's played well enough, and we all thought he did. We talked about maybe filling on one of those roster spots. Well, he actually got the two-way spot, Kyle, since you want to talk basketball, not baseball. He got the two-way spot. What are your thoughts on him? David Jones, they actually put out something on him too, getting the other two-way spot. And Justin Edwards is the one we also know about. So the 3 two-way spots right now seem to be locked in. And it also, when we go to your guy, Keve Aluma, he did not get it.
Yeah, it's funny that we're 35 minutes in. We somehow have not talked about the headline of the show, but we will talk about some Jeff Dowtin. I'm glad they were able to get Jeff Dowtin on a two-way, because I think the final roster spot, or one of those 3 final roster spots being used on a guy who baseline I don't think any of us really want to play, would have been a misuse of resources. Like, the hope would be you can get better veteran guys on that sort of minimum deal. And Dowtin is, as we've said many times, I think a quad A, the NBA version of a quad A player, where he's a little too good for the G League, not quite good enough for...
What sport does quad A refer to, Kyle?
Well, Derek, the sport that's not a real sport, but it's good for analogies for sure. So it's good that they were able to get him on this type of deal, because I would have been, I wouldn't say upset, but I would have been like, that's uninspiring. So I'm just surprised that they were able to convince him. I would have assumed that at this point, he's played enough NBA minutes and shown enough that you would think he'd probably have on one of these teams. There are a lot of bad teams in the league. You would think one team, maybe like a Detroit or a rebuilding type team, would give him like the 13th or 14th roster spot to be a backup ball handler. I will say, I think given that Kyle Lowry is the backup point guard, that this is probably a better two-way opportunity than most would be, because you would assume at his age, he will probably miss a decent amount of time this year, right? Like that, it feels inevitable for somebody his age. And I say that as someone who's only like 4 or 5 years younger than him. I can't remember what exactly our birth date gap is, but I would just assume Kyle Lowry will miss some time. And that being the case, Jeff Dowtin then has a very clear path to being like the backup guard on those nights where Lowry's out, or even if he's not hurt, if you just want to give Kyle a night off on back-to-backs or 3 games in 4 nights. So I think Dowtin will get some opportunities. I think he'll be just fine in that sort of two-way role. And I think given that they have 3 two-way contracts to give out, I'm perfectly okay with one of those being used on a guy who is in this mold where it's like he could step in and play on any given night. And the other guys are, like in Justin Edwards' case, he's a 19-year-old project sort of player. I'd rather use more slots on those guys, but one of them on a Jeff Dowtin type player, completely fine to me.
Yeah, I think a couple years back when they increased the two-way slots from 2 to 3, it made using a spot on someone like this perfectly feasible and defensible and probably smart. You are going to need to, there's going to be injuries. You're going to need to pull up a guy who can credibly defend, who can handle the ball a little bit. Might not necessarily be good enough at anything to warrant a long-term look, but can step in, knows the system, both because he played here a little bit before and played for Nick Nurse in the past, and can eat up some minutes when called upon. And I think that is what you're looking for out of Jeff Dowtin. The other 2 spots, developmental, evaluation, see what you have. I do wonder whether or not Justin Edwards, quite frankly, is deserving of one of those final 2 spots. That's where I would look. Can you find someone, whether that is someone like Aluma, whether that is somebody maybe like Mintz, who you might want to bring in and try out there? Because quite frankly, I don't think I've seen enough from Edwards to justify. I don't buy his NBA potential all that much. But I think that is a question for someone else, not so much for should Dowtin have a spot. I think Dowtin makes perfect sense.
A lot of people bringing up Mintz in the chat, liking what he did. And yeah, he did. Yeah, he looked pretty good. Didn't get to see a lot of him while we were out there, but the time that he has been out there on the floor, you see little things. Even when we had to do our grades for the end of the show, we typically thought Mintz played decently enough in the minutes that he was out there. But Jones getting the other one, highlight dunk that he had in the win over Boston. I think he led him in scoring as well. in their last game on Sunday. Him getting the other one. It's not the Justin Edwards part, but he's still young enough, knowing that a guy who came in leading his conference in scoring in college basketball, he can score. So it's an intriguing one. We thought so when they signed him in the first place, but now Kyle bringing him in and actually putting out the press release about him getting that one, also a decent one to evaluate as they go forward.
We have our first Joel Embiid grimaces playing for Team USA sighting of the summer, by the way. So just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that. Yeah, so Mintz, I actually came to like a good bit during the end of that run. Now, how much stock you put into the final, let's say like 3 games of Summer League is another story, but I thought there was some good point of attack defense in there on top of the ball handling and the creation he was able to offer. Anytime you hit a dagger over the Boston Celtics, even though it's the Summer League Celtics, that always boosts your stock for the Sixers, obviously. But yeah, like I like Mintz probably more than, I don't want to say more than Edwards, because Edwards was up and down, but I think at his size, the defensive versatility that he showed at times was really good. I don't know what he ultimately ends up being, but I think when you have that type of size and you defend as well as he did for stretches of Summer League, you're going to get a pretty long runway. And Mintz, for as good as he was, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see much floor spacing or shooting from him throughout the summer. So, and I think that was one of his concerns coming in. So I'm not sure how that type of player works in an environment where he's basically never going to be the lead guy, right? He's going to be playing off of other people. So Edwards, I get. Jones, less inspiring, also closed the Summer League strong. So I don't know. I think Mintz you might be able to convince to come in and play for the G League team. Having talked to Aluma, I feel like he might just go back overseas if he's not getting some kind of real, whether it's a two-way or like end of roster spot. He seemed like a guy that cares a lot about, and probably cares a lot about the money and like the type of contract he's going to get. And I don't think a pure G League deal is going to be enough to entice him to stay, because he does already have a deal over in Okinawa. So if he doesn't have a clear path to making a roster or getting a two-way, my guess is he would probably go back overseas.
I wonder if he's done enough to get some looks from some of the other NBA squads who might have some roster spots available. You mentioned some of those bad teams that may not have filled out their roster. I'm curious if he's getting any looks that way. Haven't heard much, but we focused on him here because he's in the uniform, and they still have some open roster spots even with the two-way. But I'm curious if he gets any looks from elsewhere because of how well he has played, and he's still playing well. The Jones piece seems like he's a couple of guys sit down. Dowtin, Ricky Council sitting down, final game, that he's had a little more opportunity out there on the floor to showcase it, and he rewards them by going out there and putting up a 20-plus game and getting a highlight play that he has and help lead them to the win. So just intrigued. I'm a little bit more intrigued than you are with Jones, just to see how that might play out on that level. But you're right. Before the last couple of games, didn't see much because it just looked like he was in the flow of the way that he needs to play for what they were doing. There were other people in front of him that they had to be a little bit more of the focal point of playing than him out there trying to be who we saw in college. So now that he got the ball a little bit more, had an opportunity to do so, then that's exactly what he did. Wanted to ask you guys, though, since Ricky Council did sit down, we thought he might sit down a little bit sooner because he might have a much better showing and in the earlier part of the Summer League, but he did sit down. Derek, your overall thoughts of Ricky Council and his Summer League from Utah to Las Vegas, what he did. We don't know how much of that is going to translate to when they get to training camp, preseason, and the regular season, but the growth from last year, Summer League, to the season, to what we saw up close and personal, and then just finishing off the Summer League the way that he did.
Yeah, well, I think there are two main takeaways. One, he can really draw fouls, and that was really what buoyed his scoring through much of the Summer League. He ended up taking almost 9 free throws per game in Vegas, which is an incredible amount. And two, the jumper, which started off pretty hot and tailed off quite a bit there in the last couple of games, I think he ended up shooting like sub 20% from three. It was actually it trailed off quite a bit, but he continued to take them pretty confidently, which is pretty good. And considering he made a decent chunk in Utah and started off decently in Vegas before trailing off. Just the confidence to take the shot is a lot of times as important as a shot going in, especially in summer league, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about when we get to McCain. But those were the two big things: the physicality that he plays with, the ability to get the line, and the continued self-confidence in that jumper, which he's going to need if he's ever going to crack a rotation spot. Would have loved to have seen it go in a little bit more, but we saw spurts of him shooting last year. We saw the free throws continue to be made at a pretty high rate. Shot 83% from the line in summer league. Those to me were the two biggest takeaways. And if you just give me a guy with the physicality to do that, and look, does he make mistakes? Yeah, some of those drives are wild, out of control. Gonna have to rein some of that in the regular season to earn a rotation spot. You can certainly see him maybe be the archetype that Nick Nurse struggles to fully embrace when the games truly matter. But I do think he's made some progress, even if, like I said, the last couple of games he struggled a little bit.
One last thing on Aluma while we're on these non-McCain guys. The thing that jumped out basically once we left Las Vegas after he had a really good start as basically a pure center. We saw him play a little bit of power forward, but it was almost all minutes at center. They used him as a forward, not exclusively, but predominantly the rest of the way. And I think that was a tell of like, okay, we need to see if this guy can really be a two-spot front court player rather than just a center, because I think you could see had the soft hands, had the finishing ability, could shoot well enough as if you're a pick and pop five, that's one thing. But if a team can't use you as much as a five, you're going to have to be a true floor spacer for others. And so they said, okay, you have to play next to Tony Bradley. You have to play more minutes next to Adem Bona. And so we saw more and more of that over those last few games over the last week. And he was not as productive, right? Like there were definitely some moments where it was a bit clunkier. And so I'm sure that played a factor into, their decision, but we'll see what that does for his prospects over here. So that was, I think the interesting thing about Summer League is seeing things like that, right? Where there are these guys that play themselves into consideration and you're like, wow, that guy looks really good. But then you have to start honing in on, all right, how much of this is sustainable on the NBA roster and specifically our roster, right? With the Sixers. And I think that applies to Ricky Council. Like I loved seeing a lot of the attacking stuff, the physicality on the drives, the free throws, as Derek mentions, but they need him to hit shots. And so if he's not hitting shots at the rate, he doesn't have to be the high four or the mid 40s guy that he was to open Summer League, but he does have to be in that kind of like 36 to 39 range, ideally on the high end of that, to get any kind of regular minutes for this team.
All right. The Jared McCain piece. He was also the big talk of the summer just because the 16th overall pick. A lot of questions, even after the selection by the Sixers. And when he didn't play well, that really stood out for a lot of people. A lot of the warts that you saw coming in showed themselves in Utah and also in Las Vegas. Kyle looking at him and seeing how he played the entire summer, including what you saw from Las Vegas. How would you rate his time overall, plus what you also got a chance to see at practice while we were out there as well?
Well, Derek, you wrote the big story on him today. Do you want to talk more about McCain first before I get into my McCain?
I was going to get to that. But,
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wrote a story about a week ago, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to sit here and wait until he has a good game and try to capitalize on that. And he didn't really have a good game until the last day of Summer League, which is probably fine because if I had to actually write that article last night, I'm not sure I would have been in a state to do so. Look, he struggled. I think he ended up shooting like 26% from the field and 25% for three, something like that in Vegas. Utah was almost the exact same. So you have 8 games of data where he just did not perform well in terms of shooting the ball. I actually came away more impressed by his overall game than I was coming into it. I think the chemistry he found with big men coming off that pick and roll especially with Bona. Seemed like it was real. It was surprising to me, quite frankly, which is good because he's never going to be a high assist guy. He doesn't put enough pressure on the rim with his athleticism to really create that much attention and create kick out lanes. But where he can leverage his gravity to find passing opportunities is with big men. And I think he is pretty well developed, certainly more developed than I expected in that regard. And the shot, I'm not really worried about. I went back and watched a lot of his attempts. I think the form there was fine. I think those were shots he's going to make. I think when you look at the history of Summer League, a lot of players, especially rookies, struggle to make shots from the perimeter. It's not really something I concern myself too with. I think it becomes a little bit more pronounced with Jared because he really doesn't have much inside the arc. And that was if I have one negative takeaway, besides his defense, and the defense Sixers play was mostly garbage anyway. It was mostly zone, certainly more zone than it should have been. But I do think he's going to struggle one-on-one defensively at times. But I think finishing around the rim is just something he's going to have a career-long battle with. And because of that, when he has a stretch where he's not making shots from the perimeter, he's going to look really, really limited. But I think that shot is going to be there. I do think he's going to end up shooting 37, 38, 39, 40% from three-point range in the NBA. In part because I think he's got the range already in his arsenal, but in part because I think he's just going to benefit a lot from Joel Embiid. So I actually came away from the Summer League not as concerned as I would have. If you would have just told me these stats, I would have expected to be really concerned. But I do think watching it, and look, I don't want to misconstrue anyone here or mislead anyone here. Athletically, he's at a pretty serious disadvantage. 6'2", 6'3" wingspan, not a lot of burst around the rim. Like I said, he's never going to be a guy I think that puts a ton of pressure on the rim. Because of that, there's going to be limited shot creation out of it. But I think the combination of the shot, which I do still believe in, I think is a key weapon next to Embiid, and along with the chemistry I think he can develop with big men, I think he can be a useful rotational piece. And is that super exciting out of a 16th pick? No. But I think coming in, none of us were necessarily super excited about him because we recognized that there was that limited upside. I think the way Rich said it on that Friday show when you guys were traveling back, or no, what day did you guys?
That was
like
Wednesday.
Wednesday. That was Tuesday, whatever. That day that you guys were traveling back, when I was talking to Rich, he showed you the limitations that caused him to fall to 16, but you shouldn't necessarily have then changed your evaluation because of his shooting slump. So I think both of those were true. Like I said, I don't want to mislead anyone. There are limitations. We saw some of those limitations in terms of finishing in the paint and around the rim, but the shooting I do think will definitely come there. And I think because of that, that will be a valuable skill set.
Yeah, I think I came out of this caring about the limitations a little more, but I was not a gigantic fan of the pick when it was made because he's 6'2" and his signature skill is shooting, and that's just a really tough way to make a living as a guard in today's league, but especially as a guard on a team that is starting Tyrese Maxey and using Kyle Lowry as a backup, and where most of the guards who will be quote unquote backup point guards will be smaller, right? Like there are not a lot of guys that are backup type guards. By the way, Joel just packed somebody's shot at the rim. So that's the best I've seen him move on defense all summer so far. So that's a positive. I just think his flaws are more meaningful at his height than they would be if he was 6'4", 6'5", because of all the different permutations of lineups that he might play in or play with or play for. I think that his inability to consistently create separation looks like a problem to me. I think if you the outside shooting, I 100% agree with Derek. Like I think the consistency and the mechanics, the drills that we're seeing him run through out in Vegas with Rico Hines and TJ DeLeo and a lot of these other guys on the staff, like I think the work ethic is there. I think the mechanical consistency is there in a way that shows you like, yeah, this kid will probably shoot. Do I believe he'll be able to do anything else consistently? Not necessarily, because if you look at the inability to create separation in these games, think about that against, actual NBA level competition, not summer league guys. And I think that that shows up not just as, he's going to struggle to finish inside the arc and at the rim. I think his playmaking opportunities will be minimized because of that inability to get by guys as much as he needs to. And so I'm still kind of like in the middle on the pick, right? Like I do think part of the reason they made the pick is because he's young, right? And because you can sell him as an upside case to if he eventually gets moved, whether that's this year or the next couple of years. I do think they believe in the shooting as probably one of the big swing skills in the draft, right? Where that it might just be good enough that that'll be his path to playing time for the foreseeable future. But I have some real concerns about him, and I don't know that they're going to go away for a while, and that's fine, right? Like he might not play a ton of minutes this year, and that's okay. Like I would have preferred if they're going to use the draft pick, maybe to use it on somebody that if you're going all in, if you're going all out to try to win the next 2 to 3 years, somebody that I have better or more confidence in that they'll be able to step into the lineup right away. But it's not the route they chose to go, so we'll see how he turns out over the next few years. It was just nice to see after a lot of bad shooting games. I know that he only played the first half of that final game out in Las Vegas. It was nice to see a strong half for him. And maybe that was, I don't know this, maybe that was like hey, let's let him ride off on a high note in Las Vegas. Nothing much more to do or prove in that game. So preserve the good vibes. I'm all about that.
All right.
He is in a little bit of a weird spot because on the one hand, he's not super high upside because he can't really create his own shot and he's limited athletically, but he also doesn't seem like he's super close to being ready to contribute. So he is both a little bit risky and also a little bit low ceiling, which is a bit of a strange combination of an archetype. But like I said, the only thing, and I don't want to like retcon it. We all had a live reaction on the draft. He was not any of our top choice at 16, even with those who fell. But in terms of, like I said, I can only evaluate what I believe in, and I do believe the shot will eventually come around, and the summer league look even worse than expected because of that, because it didn't that quickly. But also the concerns of creating his own shot and defensively are absolutely there. And I will say my bigger concern with his athletic profile is still trying to find minutes next to Maxey. I do think he can play off of Embiid offensively and find a role, but I still struggle to see how he can fit alongside Tyrese on the defensive side.
All right, it's time for us to pack this one in. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us on our new start time, 3 p.m. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. as well. We do have a super chat quickly here from Brian Pumper. Fellas, this Embiid playing right now is a shell of himself. These Olympics might be doing more damage than good. Kyle, I haven't seen a second of it. You said you have it right there. Just quickly, can you answer that one? Can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, now I'm the one who's muted because Devon was tricking everybody into thinking we're leaving, but we don't have the time to with the super chat coming in. No, Joel just had, I think, his first dunk of the Team USA slate. And then shortly after that, I quote tweeted a highlight, if anybody wants to go look on Twitter, of him packing somebody's shot on the other end that turned into a fast break for Team USA the other way. So it was a good stretch for Joel, who looks like he's getting his legs underneath him. And I, again, need to keep reiterating, concern trolling over a guy who clearly is getting better as each game goes on is a little strange to me. But what can you do?
All right. Well, we don't have the time for do we have time for an official roll call?
Yes, we do. Shout out to Jay the Jungle, Provolone John, Jess, Eugene Ross, Bootzilla, AA Ron.
What up, Boots? What up, Aaron?
Valhouse, Prophet, Brian Knight, Michael B.
Hey,
By the way, Michael B and Bootzilla, you two need to chill out. I see you guys sniping back at each other today. Both you guys are in here regularly. You're getting no more shout outs if you guys don't put a sock in it and sing Kumbaya and, be nice to one another.
What up, Mike? What up, Boots?
Thank you also to Drowning Guitars, Igavini. Who else is in here today? Slade. By the way, there was some breaking news that Turner matched, I believe it was the Amazon part of the NBA deal. So a little bit of NBA rights news today. So Inside the NBA is not dead yet. Charles Barkley and his NBA insights are here to stay. We'll end on that. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, hit the bell icon so you get notifications each and every time we go live. You hit the thumbs up button. We'll be back again at 3 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you to super producer Bree.